Dr. Lisa Kane stared at the computer screen in her underground office. The numbers dancing across the monitor made no sense. For 3 days, the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Colorado had been picking up strange signals from beyond the solar system. These were not the usual background noise from distant stars or the random energy bursts that space threw at Earth every day. This was something else. Something that made her hands shake as she typed. "Jake, come look at this," she called. To her communications specialist, Jake Miller rolled his chair over from his desk, coffee mug in hand. He was young, maybe 25, with thick glasses and a talent for making sense of impossible data. "What have you got, Doc?" Jake asked, setting his mug down carefully next to the keyboard. "I think we have a pattern," Lisa said. Her voice was quiet, the way people talk when they are not sure they want to be right. "These signals are not random. They repeat every 18 hours and 43 minutes. And Jake, they are getting stronger." Jake leaned closer to the screen. The green lines moved up and down like a heartbeat, but this heartbeat was coming from somewhere very far away. "You think it's from aliens?" Lisa had been working at the monitoring station for 12 years. She had seen solar flares, asteroid impacts, and the death of stars. She had never seen anything like this. "I think someone is trying to talk to us." 2 floors down, Dr. Amy Foster was having the same thought. Amy worked with languages, but not the kind people spoke on Earth. She studied the math and music that might be used by beings from other worlds. Her office was full of books about ancient codes and computer programs that could turn noise into meaning. The printout in her hands was 30 feet long. It was covered with symbols that her computer had pulled from the strange signals. At first, the symbols looked like random marks. But as Amy studied them, she began to see something that made her heart race. "This is a language," she whispered to herself. "This is actually a language." Amy had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. First contact with alien life. But as she worked through the night, translating symbol after symbol, her excitement turned to horror. The message was not a greeting. It was a scream for help. By morning, Amy had enough of the message translated to know they were dealing with something terrible. She printed out her work and ran upstairs to find Lisa. "And Jake, you need to see this," Amy said, bursting into the control room. Her usually neat hair was messy, and her eyes were red from staying up all night. "I know what they are saying." Lisa looked up from her computer. The Zephyrians," Amy said, reading from her notes. "That's what they call themselves. They live on a world called Aquanus Prime, and they are dying." Jake put down his coffee. "Dying how?" Amy's hand shook as she read the translation. "Their world is being destroyed. Someone called the Krell Dominion is taking everything. Their oceans, their cities, their people. The Zephyrians sent this message to anyone who might hear it. They are asking for help." The 3 scientists stood in silence. Outside, the Colorado mountains looked the same as always. Inside, everything had changed. "Need to call Washington," Lisa said finally. Within 6 hours, the small monitoring station was full of people in expensive suits and military uniforms. Admiral Rick Stone was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had spent 40 years in the Navy, but he had never dealt with anything like this. "How sure are we about this translation?" he asked Amy. "Very sure," Amy replied. "I have run it through every program we have. The math checks out. The language structure is consistent. These beings are real, and they are in trouble." Maria Santos, the civilian coordinator for the Global Defense Council, was reading through Amy's report. Maria was smaller than the Admiral, but her voice carried just as much authority. "If this is real, we have a choice to make. Do we respond, or do we stay hidden? What could we possibly do?" asked General Paul Wright, the Army's representative. "We do not even know where this planet is." Jake spoke up from his computer. "Actually, we do. I have been tracking the signal source. Aquanus Prime is about 47 light-years away. With our fastest ships, we could get there in about 6 months." Admiral Stone walked to the window and looked out at the mountains. 6 months to get there? 6 months to get back? And we have no idea what we would find when we arrive. "We would find people who need help," Maria said quietly. "Isn't that enough?" The room fell silent again. These were people who made decisions about war and peace, about the safety of billions of humans. But they had never had to decide whether to help aliens from another world. "There is something else," Amy said, looking at her notes. "The message mentions other species. The Zephyrians are not the only ones asking for help. There are dozens of different worlds, all sending similar messages, all being attacked by this Krell Dominion." Admiral Stone turned back to the group. "How long have these attacks been going on?" "Based on the timestamps in the messages, at least 200 years. Amy replied. "Maybe longer. 200 years, the Admiral repeated. "And no one has helped them?" "It looks like no one has tried," Jake said. "We might be the first species to actually receive and understand their distress calls." Maria Santos closed the report and looked around the room. "We need to take this to the President and to the United Nations. This is bigger than just America." "What about the risk?" General Wright asked. "We would be flying blind into a war zone. We could lose everything." "We could," Admiral Stone agreed. "But if we do nothing, we will lose something else. We will lose the chance to do what is right." 3 days later, Captain Jack Hayes received orders that would change his life forever. Jack was 42 years old, with 20 years of military service. He had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts, but he had never been asked to command a mission to another star system. The used Defiance was humanity's newest deep space vessel. It was designed for exploration, not war. But as Jack read his orders, he realized that the line between exploration and war might be thinner than anyone had thought. "We are going to help them," Jack said to his senior staff. Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner, his tactical officer, nodded. She was young for her rank, but she had a sharp mind and steady hands. "What are we walking into, Captain?" asked Tony Roberts, the chief engineer. Tony was older than the rest of them, with hands that could fix anything and a voice that stayed calm in any crisis. "Unknown," Jack replied honestly. "We know there are aliens in trouble. We know someone is attacking them. We know it has been going on for a long time. Beyond that, we are guessing." Colonel Dan Parker, the Marine commander, spoke up. "How many Marines are we taking?" 200, Jack said. "Plus support crew, medical team, and scientists. Dr. Elena Voss will be our xenobiologist. If we actually meet aliens, she will be the one to figure out how to talk to them." "When do we leave?" Beth asked. Jack looked at the calendar on his desk. 2 weeks. It gives us time to load supplies and run final checks. After that, we are committed. 6 months to get there. Unknown time on station. 6 months to get back. Our families will not see us for over a year. Assuming we come back, Tony said quietly. "Assuming we come back," Jack agreed. The next 2 weeks passed quickly. The Defiance was loaded with everything the crew might need for a long mission. Food, water, medical supplies, spare parts, and weapons. Lots of weapons, just in case. Dr. Elena Voss spent her time studying everything they knew about the alien messages. She was a small woman with bright eyes and a mind that could solve puzzles others could not even see. Her job was to make contact with the Zephyrians if they found any still alive. "What do you think they look like?" Jake Miller asked her. Jake had volunteered to join the mission as part of the communications team. "I have no idea," Lena replied. "But based on their language patterns, I think they are very different from us. Their world is mostly water, so they probably live in the oceans. They might not even breathe air. Will we be able to help them?" Lena looked at the star charts. On her wall, somewhere out there, beings from another world were fighting for their lives. "I hope so, Jake. I really hope so." On the day of departure, Captain Jack Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at Earth one last time. His crew was ready. His ship was ready. He was not sure anyone could be ready for what they might find at Aquanus Prime. "All stations report ready," Captain Beth Turner announced. "Take us out," Jack ordered. The Defiance left Earth's orbit and pointed toward the stars. Behind them, a world held its breath. Ahead of them, alien voices cried out in the darkness, hoping someone would hear them and care enough to help. They had no idea that help was coming from a world where caring enough to help meant being willing to fight. 6 months in space changed a person. Captain Jack Hayes looked older as he stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the blue and green world of Aquanus's prime grow larger on the main screen. The journey had been long and quiet, with nothing but the hum of engines and the distant light of stars for company. "Captain, we are picking up multiple energy signatures," Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner reported from her station. Her voice was tense. "I count at least 30 large vessels in orbit around the planet." Jack moved closer to the tactical display. The ships shown on the screen were massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever built. They hung over Aquanus Prime like predators waiting to strike. "Are they the Krell?" Jack asked. "Unknown," Beth replied. "But they are not broadcasting any identification signals. And Captain, I am detecting weapon systems. Lots of them." Tony Roberts, the chief engineer, looked up from his console. "Captain, I am reading some kind of energy beams hitting the planet's surface. They are pulling something up from the oceans." Dr. Alina Voss hurried onto the bridge, her tablet computer in her hands. She had spent the entire journey studying everything they knew about the Zephyrians. "Captain, if those are Krell ships, they are harvesting the planet. The distress messages mentioned that the Krell drain the oceans and take everything valuable." Jack watched the energy beams reach down from the orbiting ships like fingers of light. Each beam was pulling up massive amounts of water and whatever lived in it. "Take us closer, but keep us hidden behind that moon. I want to see what we are dealing with." The Defiance moved carefully around the small moon that orbited Aquanus Prime. From their new position, crew could see the planet more clearly. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The beautiful blue world was dying. Where there should have been vast oceans, there were now empty craters. The harvesting ships were drinking the planet dry, leaving behind nothing but bare rock and the bodies of sea creatures that could not survive without water. "My God," whispered Jake Miller from the communications station. "They are killing an entire world." "Captain, I am detecting smaller ships in the atmosphere," Beth reported. "They appear to be hunting something." On the screen, fast attack ships dove through the clouds like deadly birds. They fired energy weapons at moving targets below. Sometimes the targets fired back with weaker weapons, but it was clear who was winning this fight. "Those are the Zephyrians," Alina said quietly. "The small ships are trying to escape and the Krell are hunting them down." Jack felt something cold and angry growing in his chest. He had seen war before, but this was not war. This was extermination. "How many Zephyrians are left?" "I am picking up life signs from several underwater cities," Tony said, checking his sensors. "But the numbers are dropping fast. At this rate, they will all be dead within days." "Not if we can help it," Jack said firmly. "Beth, what are our tactical options?" Beth studied her displays carefully. "The Krell ships are powerful, but they are focused on harvesting. Most of their weapons are pointed at the planet. If we hit them fast and hard, we might be able to surprise them." "How many people are we talking about saving?" Jack asked. Alina worked quickly on her tablet. "Based on the life signs Tony is detecting, maybe 50,000 Zephyrians are still alive. That is all that is left of their entire species." The bridge fell quiet again. 50,000 people, an entire species reduced to almost nothing and dying fast. "Captain," came a voice from the communications station. "I am receiving a weak signal from the planet's surface." "It is in the Zephyrian language." Lena moved quickly to Jake's station. "Put it through the translator." The voice that came through the speakers was desperate and scared. Even through the electronic translation, everyone could hear the fear. "Please, anyone who can hear this. We are the last survivors of Coral City. Our barriers are failing. The hunters will find us soon. If there is anyone out there who can help us, please. Our children are dying." Jack looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people who had signed up to explore space and make contact with alien life. None of them had expected to arrive in the middle of a genocide. Captain Beth said quietly, "We are just one ship. The Krell have 30 vessels, and we do not know how many more might be coming." "I know the odds," Jack replied. "But we did not come this far to watch an entire species die while we hide behind a moon." Colonel Dan Parker's voice came over the intercom from the Marine Bay. "Captain, My Marines are ready for whatever you need. Just give us a target. Jack made his decision. All hands, this is the captain. We came here to make contact with the Zephyrians and offer assistance. What we found is a planet being murdered and a species facing extinction. We are going to help them. Battle stations. The Defiance came alive with activity. Crew members ran to their positions while the ship's weapons systems powered up. It was a small ship compared to the Krell vessels, but it was fast and carried the hopes of everyone aboard. Take us in, Beth. Target the closest harvesting ship. The Defiance shot out from behind the moon like an arrow fired from a bow. Krell ships were so focused on their harvesting that they did not notice the small human vessel until it was too late. The first Krell ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The second ship tried to turn its weapons toward the Defiance, but Tony Roberts had the engines running at maximum power. The human ship danced between the enemy weapons like a fighter dodging punches. Multiple ships turning toward us, Beth reported, as she fired the ship's main guns at another Krell vessel. They are angry. Good, Jack said grimly. They will leave the planet alone and focus on us. But even as the Defiance fought bravely, everyone knew they could not win against so many enemies. The ship shook as Krell weapons found their target, lights flickered, and alarms sounded throughout the corridors. Hull breach on Deck 7, Tony reported. Damage control teams responding. That was when Jake Miller's console lit up with an incoming signal. Captain, I am receiving a transmission from the planet. Multiple sources. Put it through, Jack ordered, still firing at the Krell ships. What came through the speakers was not words, but music. Haunting, beautiful music that seemed to come from the oceans themselves. It was the sound of voices raised together, singing in harmony despite their fear and pain. What is that? Beth asked, momentarily distracted from the battle. Alina was crying as she listened. It is their death song. When Zephyrians face extinction, they sing together so their voices can travel across space. They want the universe to remember that they existed. The music continued as the battle raged around Aquanus Prime, the Defiance. Fought like a cornered animal, striking fast and moving faster. But there were too many enemy ships, and the human vessel was taking damage. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Zephyrian cities launched every escape pod it had left. Dozens of small craft rose from the dying oceans, carrying the last survivors of their people. Captain, the escape pods are heading for the surface, Alina said urgently. Krell fighters are moving to intercept them. Jack did not hesitate. Colonel Parker, prepare for emergency rescue operations. We are going down to the planet's surface. Sir, if we enter the atmosphere, we will be sitting ducks for those fighters, Beth warned. Then we better make sure we save as many as we can. Before they shoot us down, Jack replied, the Defiance dove toward Aquanus Prime like a falling star. Behind them, Krell ships gave chase, their weapons lighting up the sky. Below them, alien escape pods crashed into the shallow waters that remained of the great oceans. Tony Roberts performed miracles with the ship's engines, keeping them flying even as systems failed around them. The ship touched down in the murky water near several crashed escape pods. Colonel Parker and his Marines were already in their rescue boats, racing toward the alien survivors. What they found in the water changed everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. The Zephyrians were beautiful in a way that took the breath away. They looked like a cross between dolphins and angels, with smooth blue skin and large, intelligent eyes that showed wisdom and sadness beyond their years. But they were also clearly dying. Their gills fluttered weakly in the shallow water, and many of them could barely move. Get them aboard now, Parker ordered his Marines. The first Zephyrian that was brought aboard the Defiance was an elderly individual who seemed to be some kind of leader. Alina was waiting in the medical bay when the Marines carried the alien inside. The moment their eyes met, Alina felt a connection that went beyond words. The Zephyrian's large eyes showed surprise, then curiosity, then something that might have been hope. Hello, Alina said softly, using the translator device she had worked on during the journey. We are humans. We heard your call for help. The alien's response came through the translator in a voice like singing water. You came. You called into the darkness, and you came. But why? Why would you risk yourselves for strangers? Alina looked at the beautiful, dying being and realized that this was the moment everything changed. First contact between humanity and alien life, and it was happening while both species faced extinction. Because it is the right thing to do, she said simply. The Zephyrian's eyes widened with an emotion that needed no translation. Wonder. The UES Defiance limped through space. Her hull scarred and smoking from the battle at Aquanus Prime, Captain Jack Hayes had managed to get his ship and the rescued Zephyrians away from the dying planet, but barely. 300 aliens now lived in the ship's cargo bays, which had been quickly converted into temporary homes with pools of water. Dr. Alina Voss spent every waking hour with the survivors, learning their language and trying to understand their culture. The eldest among them was called Nim, and he seemed to be some kind of teacher or leader. His large, dark eyes held wisdom that came from watching his entire world die. Your species confuses us, Nim said to Alina through the translation device. They were sitting beside one of the water pools where younger Zephyrians floated quietly. You arrived at our world and immediately began fighting. This is not normal behavior. Alina tilted her head. What do you mean, not normal? In our experience with other species, conflict ends quickly. One side realizes they are weaker and surrenders to avoid unnecessary death. The stronger side usually shows mercy. This has been the way of the galaxy for thousands of years. The Krell were not showing you mercy, Alina pointed out. Nim's skin changed color slightly, which Alina had learned was how Zephyrians showed strong emotion. The Krell are different. They discovered long ago that most species will not fight. If the cost becomes too high, they use this knowledge to take what they want. Alina frowned. So other species just give up? It is the logical choice, Nim explained. Why should thousands die in a war that cannot be won? Better to surrender and hope for fair treatment. But they were killing all of you, Alina said. There was no fair treatment. Yes, Nim agreed sadly. We learned too late that the Krell do not follow the old rules. By the time we realized they meant to destroy us completely, we were too few and too weak to resist. Alina stood up and began pacing around the pool. Nim, can you tell me about other species in the galaxy? The ones who are not like the Krell? Of course, there are the Verdani, who tend great forests on 100 worlds. They are peaceful and wise, but they have been slaves to the Krell for 50 years. There are the Lumina, who create beautiful art with light and crystal. The Krell use them to decorate their ships and cities. The Nexari are great scholars who once kept the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Now they work in Krell libraries, forbidden to learn anything new. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. How long has this been going on? Centuries, Nim replied. The Krell grow stronger with each conquest, while the free worlds grow fewer. We were among the last to fall. That evening, Lena called a meeting with the ship's senior officers. Captain Hayes, Colonel Parker, Beth Turner, and Tony Roberts gathered in the conference room to hear what she had learned. The galaxy is ruled by fear, Alina began. Most alien species are naturally peaceful. They have evolved past the need for violence. When faced with a stronger enemy, they surrender rather than fight a war they cannot win. That sounds reasonable, Beth said. No point in getting everyone killed for nothing. But that is exactly the problem, Alina continued. The Krell have learned to use this peaceful nature against them. They make their demands so harsh that resistance seems impossible. The other species give up before they even try to fight. Colonel Parker leaned forward in his chair. What about military forces, armies, weapons? They exist, but they are small, and mainly ceremonial. Most species have not fought a real war in hundreds of generations. They have forgotten how. Captain Hayes was quiet for a long moment. So the Krell rule the galaxy because they are the only ones willing to fight? Exactly, Alina said. Oh. And now we have shown up. A species that not only fights back, but fights with skill and determination they have never seen before. Tony Roberts whistled softly. No wonder they were so surprised. We probably seemed like maniacs to them. Which brings me to something else, Alina said. The Zephyrians are fascinated by human biology. Nim has been asking me questions about how we can function. while under extreme stress? Apparently, most species become almost helpless when they are afraid or angry. What do you mean? Beth asked. Alina pulled out her tablet and showed them a diagram. When a Zephyrian feels fear, their brain basically shuts down everything except basic survival functions. They cannot think clearly, make complex decisions, or coordinate with others. The same is true for most galactic species. But humans are different, Colonel Parker said slowly. Very different. Our brains are wired to think more clearly under pressure, not less. We can make complex battle plans while being shot at. We can coordinate attacks while terrified. We can function as a team even when everything is falling apart around us. Captain Hayes stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars outside. We evolved on a death world. What? Lena asked. Hayes turned back to the group. I have been thinking about this since we left Earth. Every other species we know about evolved on worlds that were basically paradise. Stable climates, few natural disasters, no major predators. They never had to develop the ability to think under pressure because pressure was rare. Elena's eyes widened as she understood. But Earth was different. Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years, Hayes continued. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, predators, natural disasters. The only humans who survived were the ones who could think clearly while running from a saber-tooth. Tiger or plan ahead while their world was covered in ice. So we are naturally adapted for warfare, Beth said. Not just warfare, Colonel Parker added. We are adapted for surviving impossible situations. That is what we do best. Alina looked at her notes from her conversations with Nim. This explains so much. The Zephyrians keep asking me how human soldiers can continue fighting even when they are wounded. They want to know how we can sacrifice individuals for the good of the group. They cannot understand how we make these decisions, because to them, those decisions are impossible, Tony realized. Their brains are literally not wired to think that way. Captain Hayes sat back down. What else has Nim told you? Elena flipped through her tablet. He says there are resistance groups on some worlds, but they are small and poorly organized. They have weapons, but they do not know how to use them effectively. Most importantly, they have never worked together. Each world fights alone. Has to change, Hayes said firmly. Change how? Beth asked. We are going to teach them, Colonel Parker said. We're going to show them what humans learned over thousands of years of warfare. Elena looked worried. Captain, we are talking about changing the basic nature of galactic civilization, teaching peaceful species how to fight and kill.
Are we sure this is right?
Hayes looked around the table at his officers. The alternative is watching the Krell destroy them one by one. The Zephyrians called for help and we answered. But saving 300 people is not enough. We need to save everyone. Over the next several days, the crew of the Defiance began an experiment that would change the galaxy forever. Colonel Parker started with the rescued Zephyrians, trying to teach them basic military concepts. It was harder than anyone had expected. The aliens struggled with ideas that seemed simple to humans. The concept of a feint or tactical retreat was almost impossible for them to understand. Why would you pretend to be weak when you were strong? Why would you run away from a fight? You might win. Because sometimes you have to lose a battle to win a war, Parker explained to a group of young Zephyrians. But their large eyes just stared at him in confusion. Dr. Elena Voss tried a different approach. Instead of teaching military tactics, she started sharing human history. She told them about the ancient civilizations of Earth, about the rise and fall of empires, about the great wars and the lessons they taught. The aliens listened in fascination. In horror, as Alina described the Second World War, where humans had fought against evil for 6 years without giving up. She told them about the American Revolution, where colonists had defeated the most powerful empire in the world through determination and clever tactics. Your species has been fighting for survival since the beginning, Nim said after one of these sessions. It is no wonder you are so good at it. But we also learned something else, Alina said. We learned that some fights are worth having. Even if you might lose, freedom is worth fighting for. The right to exist is worth fighting for. Meanwhile, Tony Roberts was working with the ship's communications system. He had an idea that excited and terrified him in equal measure. Using the captured Krell equipment, he began broadcasting human military doctrine to resistance groups across the galaxy. "This is dangerous," Captain Hayes warned him. "If the Krell intercept these transmissions, they will know exactly what we are doing." "Let them know," Tony replied. "Maybe it is time they learned that the galaxy is not going to roll over and die anymore." The first responses came within days. Verdani Trepards reported that they were organizing their people into fighting units. Lumina crystal workers were learning to weaponize their light manipulation abilities. Xari scholars were studying ancient military texts that had been forbidden for centuries. 3 months had passed since the rescue at Aquanus Prime, and the UES Defiance was no longer alone in space. Ships from a dozen different worlds had joined them at a hidden asteroid base that the Resistance had built in an empty star system. What had started as a simple rescue mission was becoming something that had never happened before in galactic history. A coordinated rebellion captain. Jack Hayes stood in the command center of the asteroid base, looking at the tactical display. That showed friendly ships scattered across 3 sectors. Verdani bioships that looked like giant trees, Lumina crystal vessels that sparkled like diamonds, Xari Nala ships filled with ancient weapons that had not been used for centuries. And at the center of it all, human ships that had arrived. From Earth, carrying more Marines, more weapons, and more importantly, more teachers. Status report, Jack said to Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner, had been promoted to overall tactical coordinator for the growing fleet. "We now have 43 ships under our command," Beth reported. "The Verdani have contributed 12 biovessels, each one capable of growing new weapon systems. The Lumina have 8 crystal ships that can focus starlight into cutting beams. The Nexari brought 15 knowledge ships loaded with forgotten technology." "And the Krell response?" Jack asked. "They are getting nervous," Beth said with a smile. "Our raids on their supply lines have forced them to pull ships back from their harvesting operations. 3 worlds have been completely liberated because the Krell no longer have enough forces to hold them." Colonel Dan Parker approached the command table, his uniform dirty from training exercises. For weeks, he had been working with alien volunteers, teaching them everything humans knew about warfare. It was the hardest job he had ever attempted. "How is the training going, Colonel?" Jack asked. Parker rubbed his tired eyes. "Illy, but we are making progress. The Zephyrians are natural team players once they learn to control their fear responses. The Verdani are incredible at coordinated movements. They think like a forest, all connected. The Lumina can communicate instantly across vast distances. Using light signals and the problems," Jack asked, because he could see the frustration in Parker's face. "The biggest problem is that they still think like prey animals," Parker admitted. "They have trouble with aggressive tactics, ambushes, surprise attacks, deception. These concepts are hard for them to accept, even when they understand the logic." Dr. Alina Voss joined the conversation, carrying a datapad full of reports from across the galaxy. "That is changing, though. The younger generation is adapting faster than their elders, and we are getting help from an unexpected source." "Do you mean?" Jack asked. Alina smiled and activated a hologram projector. The image of a fierce-looking reptilian alien appeared in the air above the table. The creature had sharp teeth, clawed hands, and eyes that burned with intelligence and anger. "This is war leader Grix of the Soren clans," Elena said. "His people are from a world called Talon Prime, and Captain, they evolved from predators." Stared at the hologram. "Another Deathworld species?" "Exactly. The Sorens have been fighting the Krell for over 100 years, but they have been doing it alone. They never thought to work with other species because, well, they assumed everyone else was too weak to help." "Where are they now?" Parker asked, suddenly very interested. 3 systems away, raiding a Krell mining operation. War leader Grix has agreed to meet with us, but he wants to see proof that these other species can actually fight, Jack considered. This news. Another species that understood warfare could be exactly what they needed. Set up the meeting, and Colonel, prepare a demonstration. 2 days later, War leader Grix arrived at the asteroid base in a ship that looked like it had been built for one purpose, destroying other ships. The Soren himself was even more impressive in person, standing nearly 7 feet tall with scales. that seemed to absorb light and muscles that spoke of a lifetime of combat. "So," Grix said in heavily accented English, "you are the humans everyone is talking about. You do not look like much." Captain Hayes smiled. "Neither do you, compared to a Krell dreadnought. But I bet you have caused them plenty of trouble." Grix showed his teeth in what might have been a grin. "True, but these others," he gestured toward a group of Zephyrians, Verdani and Lumina, who were watching nervously. "They look like food, not fighters. Watch and learn." Colonel Parker said. The demonstration took place in a large training chamber that had been carved out of the asteroid. Parker had set up a mock battle scenario, a Krell supply depot that needed to be captured. The defending force was made up of human marines using captured Krell weapons. The attacking force was a mixed unit of aliens who had been training together for months. Grix watched with growing amazement as the alien force executed a complex attack plan. The Verdani used their bioships to create living camouflage, hiding the assault force until the last moment. The Lumina coordinated the attack using light signals that moved faster than radio, allowing perfect timing. The Zephyrians moved through the water-filled sections of the base like deadly shadows, striking from unexpected angles, but it was the combination of different species working together that truly impressed the Soren war leader. Each species covered the weaknesses of the others. The Verdani were slow but tough. The Lumina were fragile but could strike from great distances. The Zephyrians were vulnerable on land but unstoppable in water. "Interesting," Grix admitted. When the exercise was over, they fight like a pack. Not like individuals, but as one creature with many parts. That is what humans learned thousands of years ago, Parker explained. No single warrior can win a war. But warriors working together can defeat any enemy, even Krell dreadnoughts, Grix asked. "Especially Krell dreadnoughts," Jack said, "because the Krell have never learned to work with anyone but themselves. They rule through fear, not cooperation. That makes them powerful, but also predictable." Over the next few weeks, Grix and his Soren warriors integrated with the growing rebellion. Their natural aggression helped teach the other species that sometimes violence was not just acceptable, but necessary. Meanwhile, the peaceful species taught the Sorens about coordination and long-term planning. The real test came when Scholar Dex of the Nexari arrived with intelligence that changed everything. The elderly alien looked exhausted as he presented his findings to the command staff. "I have located the Krell homeworld," Dex announced. "It is called Dominion Prime, and it is the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. But more importantly, I have learned why the Krell became the way they are." "Tell us," Alina said, leaning forward with interest. "Dominion Prime is a world of constant volcanic activity and poisonous atmosphere, evolved and underground. Caverns, fighting for every resource. But unlike humans, who learned to work together, the Krell learned only to dominate. They believe that strength is the only truth, and that the weak deserve to be enslaved or destroyed. That explains their behavior," Jack said grimly. "But why does this matter now?" Because Dex continued, "Their entire military philosophy is based on individual strength and intimidation. They have never faced an enemy that was weaker individually, but stronger as a group. They literally do not know how to fight a coordinated resistance." War leader Grix slammed his clawed fist on the table. "Then we will teach them." The plan that emerged from that meeting was audacious beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of hit-and-run raids, the rebellion would launch a coordinated assault on multiple Krell strongholds simultaneously. Each attack would be designed to force the Krell to spread their forces thin, making them vulnerable to the final assault on Dominion Prime itself. Captain Hayes found himself in command of the largest military alliance in galactic history. Ships from 50 worlds, each contributing their unique abilities to the common cause. The Verdani had grown massive bioships that could repair themselves in battle. The Lumina had created weapons that could slice through Krell armor like paper. The Nixari had provided ancient technology that the Krell had never countered. But it was the human contribution that tied everything together. Human tactical doctrine, adapted for alien capabilities. Human leadership principles, modified for species that thought in fundamentally different ways. Human stubbornness. The the refusal to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Lieutenant Commander. Beth Turner coordinated fleet movements across dozens of star systems. Tony Roberts had become the chief engineer for an entire rebellion, teaching alien mechanics how to maintain and improve their weapons. Dr. Elena Voss worked with diplomats from every species, building the political structure that would govern. The galaxy after the Krell were defeated. The first coordinated strikes began 3 weeks later, across the galaxy. Krell bases found themselves under attack by forces they could not understand. Instead of the usual panicked surrender or chaotic resistance, they faced organized, disciplined armies that seemed to anticipate their every move. The fleet that approached Dominion Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Over 200 ships from 60 different worlds moved together in perfect formation. At the center flew the UES Defiance, her hull still scarred from the battle at Aquanus Prime, but her weapons gleaming with new modifications created by alien engineers. Captain Jack Hayes stood on his bridge, watching the massive Krell homeworld grow larger on the main screen. Dominion Prime was a nightmare of volcanic fire and poison clouds, surrounded by orbital fortresses that could destroy entire fleets. But today, those fortresses faced something they had never encountered before, a unified galaxy that had learned. To fight, all ships report ready, Captain, Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner announced from her tactical station. Her voice was calm, but Jack could see the tension in her shoulders. This battle would decide the fate of billions of beings across the galaxy. Signal from War Leader Grix came the voice of Jake Miller from Communications. The Soren battle claws are in position and ready to strike. Verdani Bioships report. Full growth completion, added another voice. Tree Singer Vel says their living vessels are hungry for Krell blood. Dr. Elena Voss looked up from her translation console. The Zephyrians are singing their war song, Captain. Elder Nim says they are ready to avenge their homeworld. Jack took a deep breath and opened the fleet-wide communication channel. His words would be translated instantly into dozens of languages and sent to every ship in the Armada. Warriors of the Free Galaxy, he began. 6 months ago, we heard a cry for help from across the stars. Today we answer that cry not just for the Zephyrians, but for every species that has lived under the shadow of Krell tyranny. Today, we teach the galaxy that freedom is not something that can be taken away if good beings are willing to fight for it. The response was immediate. Across the fleet, beings from dozens of worlds raised their voices in songs of war, roars of defiance, and harmonies of hope. The sound carried across space itself, a declaration that the age of Krell domination was ending. The first phase of the attack began with the Nexari knowledge ships. Scholar Dex had discovered something in the ancient archives that gave them a crucial advantage. The Krell defensive systems were based on technology that was thousands of years old, unchanged because no one had ever challenged them successfully. Initiating Phase 1, Beth announced. Nexari vessels are broadcasting the ancient override codes. On the tactical display, Jack watched as the outer ring of Krell orbital fortresses suddenly went dark. Their weapons powered down, and their shields collapsed as the ancient Nexari codes convinced the Krell computers that they were being serviced, not attacked. Impossible, whispered Tony Roberts from his engineering station. They actually hacked a 1,000-year-old computer system. Nexari remember everything, Elena said with admiration, including the programming languages that built these defenses. But the victory was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout the Krell command structure as Supreme Leader Vorth realized what was happening. The inner defenses, newer and more heavily protected, came online with devastating fury. Multiple missile launches detected, Beth reported as her console lit up with warnings. Krell dreadnoughts are moving to intercept us. Phase 2, Jack ordered. All ships, execute the Harmony Protocol. What happened next would be talked about in Galactic history classes for generations to come, instead of fighting as individual ships. The Allied fleet moved like a single organism. The Verdani bioships grew protective barriers around the more fragile vessels. The Lumina crystal ships focused starlight into cutting beams that sliced through Krell armor. The Soren warclaws struck fast and hard at weak points, while Zephyrion, Waterships used their fluid movements to dodge between enemy fire, and coordinating it all were the humans, their Deathworld-trained minds processing the chaos of battle and turning it into victory. Colonel Dan Parker led the first wave of boarding parties as human marines and alien warriors fought side by side through the corridors of Krell. Battleships. The enemy had never faced anything like this before. Warriors who became more dangerous when they were wounded, who fought harder when their friends were killed, who refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. The Krell are pulling back, War Leader Grix reported over the communication system. His voice carried the excitement of a predator who had finally found worthy prey. Their ships are retreating toward the planet's surface. They are regrouping for a final stand, Jack realized. All ships prepare for planetary assault. The battle for Dominion Prime itself was the most brutal fighting any of them had ever experienced. The Krell threw everything they had at the invading forces' ancient war machines. Biological weapons, reality-twisting technology that hurt the mind to look at. But for every weapon they used, the Allied forces had an answer. The Verdani grew. Plants that could survive in the toxic atmosphere and provided clean air for the other species. The Lumina created light barriers that protected against Krell energy weapons. The Nexari found ways to turn the Krell's own technology against them. And the humans did what humans did best. They adapted, improvised, and never gave up. Dr. Elena Voss found herself in the strangest situation of her life, providing translation services in the middle of a combat zone. As different species worked together to storm the Krell command fortress, she helped them coordinate attacks in real time. The Zephyrians, to flood the lower levels, shouted a Soren warrior as he fired his weapon at Krell defenders. The water will short out their defensive grid. The Verdani can grow through the ventilation system, added a human marine. They can attack from inside, while we hit them from outside, Lena translated rapidly, and within minutes the coordinated assault was underway. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos, and the kind that humans had been perfecting for thousands of years, and had now taught to the galaxy. The final confrontation took place in the throne room of Supreme Leader Vorth himself. The massive Krell leader stood surrounded by his personal guard, his eyes burning with rage and disbelief as Captain Hayes entered the chamber, followed by representatives from every species in the Alliance. "This is impossible," Vorth snarled, his voice like grinding stone. "You are prey animals. You should have surrendered when you saw our strength." "That is where you made your mistake," Jack replied calmly. "You thought strength was about size and weapons. But real strength comes from working together, from protecting each other, from fighting for something bigger than yourself." Elder Nim stepped forward, his blue skin glowing with inner light. "You destroyed our world and killed our people, but you could not destroy our hope." War Leader Grix showed his teeth in a fierce grin. "You taught the galaxy to fear you. Now the galaxy has learned to fight you." Scholar Dex raised an ancient device that pulsed with forgotten power. "You used our own peaceful nature against us. But knowledge is the greatest weapon of all, and we have remembered how to use it." Vorth looked around the room at the faces of dozens of species, all united in their determination to end his reign of terror. For the first time in his long life, the supreme leader of the Krell Dominion felt something he did not recognize at first. Fear. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "We want you to surrender," Jack said simply, unconditionally. The age of Krell domination is over. The battle for the galaxy had lasted only 3 days, but its effects would ripple across space for centuries. The Krell Empire, which had ruled through fear for over 1,000 years, simply collapsed. Without their supreme leader, and with their core worlds liberated, the remaining Krell forces scattered or surrendered. But the real victory was not military, it was social. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species had worked together as equals to achieve a common goal. It learned that they did not have to be victims, that they could stand up for themselves and each other. In the months that followed, the Galactic Defense Accord was established with its headquarters on the liberated world of New Haven. Captain Hayes was offered the position of Supreme Commander, but he politely declined. "I am a ship captain," he told the assembled delegates. "My job was to answer a distress call and offer assistance. That job is done." Instead, the Alliance chose a council of representatives from every member species. Elder Nim spoke for the aquatic worlds. War leader Grix represented the warrior cultures. Scholar Dex became the keeper of knowledge and law. Dr. Elena Voss established the first interspecies military academy, where young beings from across the galaxy learned not just how to fight, but why fighting was sometimes necessary. The motto above the academy entrance read, "Strength to protect, wisdom to choose, courage to act." Colonel Parker returned to Earth with stories that seemed impossible even to him. Tony Roberts became the chief engineer for the new Galactic fleet. Designing ships that combined the best technology from dozens of worlds, the Zephyrians began the long process of reclaiming Aquanus Prime. Using Verdani, biotechnology, and human engineering, they slowly restored water to the empty ocean basins. Children who had never seen their homeworld swam in rebuilt seas and sang songs of hope instead of mourning.